This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and of course, I got some boxing for you. I've been wanting to discuss this for quite some time, and it's about time for me to get this discussion out in the open. I look at Floyd Mayweather's career, and he's one of the best of our generation. He's beat a lot of champions. He's done a lot for the sport of boxing, as opposed to other fighters. But one thing that I just really could not get about Floyd Mayweather is why in any of his professional boxing career, why hasn't he ever fought any Cuban fighters? He has never fought one single Cuban fighter. And there's been a lot of the last 20 years, the last 15, 20 years, a lot of Cubans and formidable opponents for Floyd Mayweather in the same weight class, fought at the same time, and for some strange reason, he's never fought them. In fact, I just got through watching a YouTube clip of the 1996 Olympic Games. And of course, young Floyd was in there, talented as ever. But he fought a Cuban fighter by the name of Lorenzo Arango, right? And I saw this fight, and Floyd, he won by 1 point. But I looked at this fight. It wasn't like an easy fight for Floyd. In fact, it was more on a equal playing field as Floyd Mayweather, Floyd, of course, showed skill. He threw hooks to the body, upstairs, and a lot of punches that they didn't count. Possibly the excuse was they weren't clean. But this Cuban guy, he took a walk around the block. He shoe-shined him. He pot-shotted him. He countered him. It was a pretty even bout because Floyd did basically the same. I think Floyd actually did a lot, more inside than the Cuban fighter, Of course, he's an amateur, and the Cuban guy was 22 years old. Lorenzo was 22 years of age. However, it just goes to show you, it just makes me scratch my head because this guy actually gave Floyd a good fight, maybe, just maybe, in my opinion, that's the reason Floyd never wanted to fight any Cubans, because he knew what their style was. He knew what Cuba had to offer, such as talent, And, when you're dealing with a boxing pedigree of a Cuban fighter, if you look at fighters like Rigondeaux, you look at fighters like Lara, you even look at fighters like Joel Casamayor back in the day. These guys were actually really good fighters, and Floyd never fought them. The only fighter that I know he couldn't have fought was the Jackal at Hakal, Rigondeaux, you know what I mean? Because he was just too small. I mean, he's 122 pounds. I'm not talking about him. He was probably one of the best. I would like to see a fight in a fantasy matchup, fantasy speaking only with that fight. I'm talking about all the other fights, I can remember back in the early 2000s, Floyd was he was a WBC lightweight champion of the world. He had the WC belt. Diego Corrales had a piece of that belt. I believe he had the WBA. Acelino Freitas had the IBF. And Joel Casamayor had, I believe, the WBO. Okay? Well, all the fighters that he fought Diego Chico Corrales, which he destroyed Diego Chico Corrales. And Diego Corrales was 33-0 when they fought. And I think he had like 29 knockouts. He had a high knockout percentage, and he got in there with Floyd, and Floyd dismantled him, dispatched him, and I was just blown away. January 20th, 2001, and that was a high anticipated fight for me. I couldn't wait for it to come on. I fell asleep looking at a movie before it came on. I was that interested because I was just like, nothing else would do. I had to see this fight. In 10 rounds, I saw some of the best boxing that I ever saw. When he fought Diego Corrales, and then, of course, he left lightweight and, of course, went to 135, after he vacated. But you think about all the other talent that he just totally avoided at 130. Acelino Freitas, he was more of a brawler, but he was probably the littlest known of the champions of that weight class at the time, and for good reason, because, he was a Brazilian fighter. They didn't have a lot of fighters out of Brazil, let alone champions. So, Acelino Freitas was kind of like, I can understand him not fighting him. But, you also had Joel Casamayor, was undefeated. He defected from Cuba maybe 2 or 3 years prior, and he had developed him a nice resume, and he put a nice resume together, and that fight was on the table at one point. For whatever reason, it wasn't made. So that made me scratch my head because, in fact, the person that beat Diego Corrales was Joel Casamayor, and actually he beat him twice, and one he lost, due to a lot of points deducted. So basically, you're safe to say he beat Diego Corrales 3 times. You know what I mean? And if Floyd dismantled him easily, and Diego Corrales was Joel Casamayor was able to take Corrales out in the 6th round. It's kind of like you got to do the math. You know what I mean? But that was one, and I was always wondered, okay, why didn't that fight ever take place? You got the 2 golden Olympic gold medalists that's coming head to head against each other. Why not? But it never happened. And it was a lot of fights at that 130. Of course, at 140, Dio Bayless Hurtado, that gave Pernell Whitaker absolute hell, which was undefeated at the time. He was fighting at 140. Floyd didn't fight him. And then Floyd fought Chop Chop Curley, fighters like that. Not taking anything away from Curley, but Corley was he was a brawler, he was a brawler puncher, he had some boxing skills, but, Floyd took him out, little Floyd took him out, Pretty Boy took him out, but like there was other fights to be made. What about Hurtado? Hurtado was one of the toughest guys at that weight class, besides Zoo or himself, Hurtado. So Hurtado that fight could have been made easily. And I always wondered, and Hurtado had a hard punching power. He was awkward, but he was really fast. Again, that's why he gave Pernell Whitaker such a hell of a time when Pernell Whitaker fought him. And if it wasn't for the knockout in the 11th round of that fight, Pernell Whitaker would have lost the decision because he was already dropped twice in a very hard, murky, dirty fight with Dio Bayless Hurtado. And again, if he was even a gatekeeper or something, and he was a very dangerous fighter. Dio Bayless's record is only 3 losses. He has a nice knockout percentage. Floyd, was able to elude that particular fight, between another Cuban fighter at a different weight class, moving up in weight, and in the latest one, of course, is Erislandy Lara, when, of course, he was picking all these guys, Berto, he picked Canelo, Guerrero, Berto, Canelo, he picked all these guys at welterweight or super welterweight, but it was like Lara was like that elephant in the room, and the styles were similar. The only difference is Lara was at 154, which Floyd was a champion at 154 because he took the belt from Canelo Alvarez, okay? So that fight could have been on the table. It could have easily been made. Lara was a Al Heyman fighter, you had all this Cold War shit, you know, and you still have it actually, but, you know, I mean, Floyd's supposed to be retired, but there was a lot that just showing it was so easy for that fight to get made simply because Floyd Mayweather's advisor was Al Heyman. Erislandy Lara's promoter was Al Heyman. You know, that fight could have been made. And it could have been made it really easily because Erislandy Lara, it could have been marketed, hey, he's really never lost a fight. You know, he had somewhat of Pernell Whitaker's luck when it came to decisions. You know what I mean? And I always wondered why that fight was never made. And it's not like Lara hasn't called out Mayweather. You know, and it's like Mayweather never goes on record mentioning anything about Lara. I think one time he congratulated Lara for getting a fight with Canelo Alvarez before they fought. And Lara's reply was, well, yeah, good. After I beat Canelo, then we can fight. You know, and I like the response. But nothing, it was just crickets on the Mayweather's end about these call-outs, you know. And it is not the boxing pedigree. You can't blame that shit on the ticket sales or he's not a good house name because you pick guys like the Ghost Guerrero. Who the hell is Guerrero? You know, besides diehard boxing fans, no one really knew who the hell that was before he stepped in there with Floyd Mayweather Jr. You know, of course, I knew who he was. I mean, yeah, he beat up Berto and held him behind the head and all that shit. You know, it was a really dirty fight, you know. He was a really dirty fighter. I mean, Guerrero, he has heart. He has a pretty good chin. But, I mean, who the hell is he again? He beat a potential guy that was going somewhere in the sport of boxing, which was Andre Berto. But other than that, he was little known. Berto, he was the guy, of course, I just got through talking about him, that was supposed to have been about shit, but really wasn't about shit. You know, he got beat by Soto Caras, Victor Ortiz, you know, like guys that he shouldn't have been beat by. You know what I mean? Guerrero, you know, he got beat by all these guys, and that was the guy that Guerrero beat. So again, who the hell was Guerrero when Floyd decided to fight him? You know, he had a blemished record. You know what I mean? He had a loss. He had, you know, he wasn't a perfect fighter. I mean, he had a decent record at the time, you know. Of course, he's been in wars by now, you know, with Kamagai or whatever. But you know, before I get too far off point, you know, Floyd picked these guys to fight, and he didn't fight the best fighters. And I think the reason why he never picked a Cuban fighter to fight is because he didn't want to be challenged. You know, I mean, think about this. Think about when Floyd fought Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto had Floyd's nose bleeding, like free-flowing, bleeding, bloody, you know, and it's like you look at all that, and that shit was exciting because, you know, damn, Floyd Mayweather's, he's actually getting challenged. Someone's actually punching this dude. Someone's actually able to put a fucking glove on him. You know what I'm saying? So, and this is Miguel Cotto. And this is post-Miguel Cotto after he's been cheated from Margachito's gloves and shit like that. And able to give Floyd a good fight. You know, regardless of what else Floyd had going on at the time. And he could have did this. He wasn't in shape. He wasn't 100%. But he still got touched by Miguel Cotto. You know? And you think about fights like that. That, yes, he took those fights. You know, he took them after Pacquiao, you know, beat Miguel Cotto. But look how Cotto did. Look at the performance Cotto gave Floyd. You know, Floyd won, but look at the performance. You know, that wasn't an easy fight for Floyd. Cotto was a tough competitor and champion. You know, so, you know, that just shows you, you know, I mean, that was a good time. People like to see champions challenged. There's no sense of having a champion that picks bullshit fights just for the sake of having an undefeated record. You know, I will never believe that. I will never think that a fighter has done so much in the sport of boxing, he can pick a bullshit Rod Salka fight. I would never think that. You know, that will never be my MO. Never. Because I know that shit's not true. You know, that's propaganda bullshit to sell money, to sell tickets. I get it, but that's not the essence of boxing. You know? So I believe Floyd never picked a Cuban fighter because he knew what they brought to the table. He knew the pedigree again. He knew that, hey, they can move just as much as he can. He has footwork. They're not flat-footed Mexican fighters that like to brawl. No, they're pot shotters, counterpunchers, just like him. Why do you think a lot of people compare him to Lara? Why do you think Lara's actually freaking hated? You know, if you really think about it, a lot of people don't really like Lara. They call him a runner. They call him a bullshit artist. They call him everything besides a true boxer. Oh, he runs around the ring, manejando en bicicleta, you know, all this shit. He gets on his bicycle and he runs and all this and that and the other. But again, the guy can fight. The guy knows how to box, you know? So again, I don't really understand why Floyd never took a fight from a Cuban. I never understood it. In 3 separate times and 3 separate parts of his career, those fights had became available on the table and he never took them. You know what I mean? And for him to take lower opposition and people with shittier and undermining resumes and talent and pick that fight just to look good, that's not impressive. That's not impressing me. That shit will never impress me, you know? And if he comes back, sure, it's going to be for money. You know what I mean? And yeah, he'll probably fight Danny Garcia, but if Danny Garcia stays undefeated, which he has, because Danny Garcia is, he's a cherry picker, but what he does, he picks fights just good enough. I mean, you can't win a decision against Danny Garcia. You know, he has a lot of flaws in his arsenal, and not taking anything away from Danny Garcia. But I know if Floyd came back, Floyd would beat him, you know, because he sees those looping punches he throws and shit like that. But he knows that, hey, he's a Puerto Rican fighter. Floyd is an African-American fighter, black fighter, whatever you want to call it. And he knows that you can sell when you put those two together. He said it himself. So, yes, Danny Garcia is undefeated. Danny Garcia is with Al Haymon. But who else is with Al Haymon? Here's Lanny Lara. You won't ever hear about that fight. Why? Because, again, Floyd does not like to be challenged. You know, he doesn't like a really good challenge. It's always that person that he could have fought, you know. But with these Cuban fighters, man, you know, I think they have his number. And he knows they have his number. You know, Lorenzo Arango damn near had his number. You know what I mean? You know, who knows if the kid would have actually defected and became professional. You know, that would have been a very interesting matchup if they would have fought pro. Floyd probably would have beat him, but at the same time, he wouldn't have beat him easily. He wouldn't have beat him like those hand-picked fights that Leonard Ellerbe picks for him and Al Haymon gets together and selects for him and decides, I think I'm going to pick Guerrero. You know, shit like that. You know, so again, man, you know, that's just my thoughts on that. Let me know something on the comments. You know, give me some feedback on it, because it might just be me, you know. But if it is just me, just let me know. So this is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News. Please subscribe with Fresh One Media, and you've been counterpunched. Peace.